Kwaheri nungu zangu keisho na yo ma. Kwaheri nungu zangu keisho na yo ma.
Nakwenda zimbani kwa mama papa.
Kwaheri nungu zangu keisho na yo ma.
And that was the one about saying goodbye.
Bye. Yeah.
It was a goodbye song to Africa
to
or to mummy and daddy or
something about that
going
away. But the other one is about the Lion of Berlin.
Yes.
Simba wa Beni.
Yeah.
The Lion of Hitler.
The Lion of Berlin.
It's about where Simba wa Beni.
Well, that was sung in Swahili in Kenya.
Yeah. Because they were drawn into the war, weren't they?
Yeah.
British Empire.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good point to start, maybe, that song, because that was something Dad passed on. Yeah. Those stories from the war. Yeah. And it's interesting because we were talking about it yesterday, whether there was a possibility of Dad having post-traumatic stress from the war, from being active in the war. And you know that bit that you said?
Where he tried to be a painter.
Where he tried to be a painter and
got depressed.
Yeah.
And East Dulwich.
Yeah, and we think that was all about his conflict about being an artist. But could it have had... It was only in the 50s, not even 10 years after.
It's possible, I guess, yeah. He must have been wondering which way his life was going at that time.
Because there's another story, actually.
Once when I spoke to him about that a few years later, he couldn't remember that period.
Really?
What, the Dulwich?
I said, because I was always quite interested in that period, of turmoil when he was trying to become an artist.
Well, it wasn't very long, was it?
An artist in the garret. He couldn't quite remember it. Yeah, things like that just seemed to go out of his
I think
head.
it might have been less than a year. And I don't know what year that would have been, because... When was it? Because when he was in Paris, and then he came back, because Mum was... Harley was going to...
Had proposed. Had he?
Yeah,
he proposed. It wasn't just Harley. It was Graham Cable. He did. Harley. He did.
Two of them proposed. Yeah. So Dad hot-footed it back to London. Yeah. So did the Dulwich bit happen after that?
I don't know, Ben, the choreography of it, but the chronology.
Because that's what he said in the talk 5 years ago, that he went to Paris to train to be a painter.
With Desnoyers?
With Desnoyers.
No, Desnoyers was down in the south.
He
was. He lived in the south, so he did go to the set.
That was first. He went to
set first, and then he came back to Paris because there's a letter from Desnoyers to the Louvre to ask permission for Dad to go and draw.
Oh, really? We have that.
Yeah, we have that.
I'd love to see that.
It was the Académie Française, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That's when he went to.
Yeah. And then. So then he came back and met up with Mum, but I don't know whether that's when he got the...
And that was 1953, was it? That happened?
I think so, 52 or 53.
But anyway, when did they go on that sort of that journey around France in a black cab or
that must have been before.
That was before. It would have been 50 or 49 even. Yeah, somewhere like that. And that sounded so bohemian, didn't it? Because I remember Mum saying at Harley's funeral that Harley, they all went in this black cab and they went round all of the mountain passes and the Pyrenees, and the car would have like trails of food and hampers.
Well, the tin of tea fell out on the road and they stopped and scraped it up because they couldn't afford to buy it. That was one story.
And they just stopped at Vistas and painted them.
And the tyres were so bad that the inner tube was poking out of the wall of the tyre.
Yeah, and they had to patch it up, didn't they, somehow? Bits of rubber or something. They did something odd with the tyre.
For their times, it seems like they were quite unusual. But having said that, I've got a friend who said her father or mother went to
the south of France in a taxi. So I don't know whether it was, not so unusual. Maybe it was that post-war feeling people are doing new things.
Yeah.
So Dad really wanted to become an artist, didn't he? Initially, he was quite determined. Once he'd and he, I know you mentioned when he was at art college. It was easy, but suddenly when he was on his own,
faced with it,
he couldn't do it. And I think that's. So I'm quite most interested in that part of his life.
Yeah.
Suddenly your confidence going, and it is quite a difficult thing. It's like being faced with a blank page, isn't it? For me, being faced, and you said he was faced with a blank canvas, and he just got quite depressed, and he couldn't.
But also, I mean, you can imagine it. Being in the war, this huge global conflict going on, and everything had a purpose that was very clearly defined in the army. You had to do what you were told to do. And then he was, after he went to art college, he was liberated from all of that. And I suppose he must have been faced with the sort of idea, what's the point of doing art? Kind of, you can just imagine it, in this little room in this flat. Just thinking.
But in relation to what he'd gone through in the war. But then why would he not have gone through that at art college? Maybe because he had the stimulation of other people and it's structured.
And people, everybody else.
Do you think he had the feeling of it? What's the point of this?
Well, possibly. That's what I would have thought. Suddenly you're on your own in a flat in Dulwich, not earning any money, and think, after everything you've been doing for the last 5 or 6 years, you'd think, what is actually the point of it?
But I remember a lot of people who've gone through art school and then come out. I did it as well because I went through art school.
Yeah.
You come out and you got that. I think that's what I've learned from Dad is he had at some point he went through that process of worry and down and depression, but he then has this he has a characteristic, this determination to see something through.
Yeah.
So he must have got over that hump and decided to go for it and turned to ceramics because it was a practical thing. But then kept going, and he's a finisher, really. You remember the hours he spends, on doing something, and that's a big lesson. Because I remember a lot of artists come out of art schools, or students or graduates, and I don't think they learn that patience and that determination. It's hard. You've either got it inside you, because it is very hard to make it as an artist.
That came through to us. Completely. You see yourself as
I'd like to think
finisher.
I think that's
to some extent.
I think
Ben has it, and
I think that influenced me quite a lot.
I
think I've got that in my personality to once I start something to keep on going, and there's something about having had that as an example from Dad that I think actually
early on
has been quite good for me because, like you say, once you've done a creative course, my case writing. A lot of people just don't carry on. But I think that he did give us a good example in the sense that he persisted, and he always used to say he was quite plodding, and I feel I'm like that.
That's good.
I plod away at
and
it.
Something comes
without, and actually I have learned, not just through Dad, but that the only way to get somewhere creatively is just to do it, to keep on doing it and learn from it.
But I think that's something we learn from him and Mum in a different kind of way. They're both very energetic and determined to do things and make things happen, but Dad in a very quiet, contemplative, sort of individual solo way.
He's self-contained, wasn't he?
With Mum was all
chaos
theory, wasn't it?
It was chaotic, but
it always came good in the end.
And she'd organise people to do things.
Because I see myself like my mum, sort of semi, anarchistic way of doing things.
Yeah.
But more social.
But possibly more social. Yeah, exactly. Not very sort of didactic in the way Dad was. Very instructional and organised.
But I think I've got that to some extent. That sort of dogged determination. But then also because I was, I grew up in the 70s, so the tail end of the sort of hippie, relaxed way of thinking, and I was kind of happy for a long time just to sort of drift along. Although there were points you know, when I was doing architecture, I think getting really fed up because I wasn't satisfied with what I was doing.
Yeah.
But you're organised, Ben, and I think Dad was very organised.
Yeah, he was.
You know, in his mind as well as his practice, things
methodical.
There was and he'd write things down, which is why Ben being able to look at all this.
I'm getting to that. That's high level for me.
Yeah, and doing this work here in the pottery, you really realise that.
You have to be.
All the all the glaze recipes.
Well, because you forget exactly what's happening.
Yeah, not saying that there's any examples there, but there are some of these books where he not only writes the recipes down, but there's notes about what he was thinking.
Yeah,
how they should be applied.
He was surprisingly methodical.
He was,
but that's something we didn't really know.
Why surprising?
Yeah, see here, look.
Well, he was quite a methodical person, but I'm still surprised that he.
Wavy necked bottle, green glaze.
So that again, then?
Wavy necked bottle, green glaze, earthenware jar with slit trailed decoration.
Yeah.
So I think this is actually a list of things that people that's all about, a retrospective. But in various places he does.
But
does he write about ideas? What did he do? Or did he sketch
one of these books.
His ideas?
That's some really interesting.
Yeah, on one book upstairs he's got a massive amount of architectural features that he drew. Of sort of
I think that was
architraves and
I think that might have been a college
course.
But it's a lovely example of his drawing skill.
Yeah, see, look here. No, it's February the 12th, 13th. Don't know what year that is. Adequate, but not very interesting. And those are the glazes.
Oh, they're the glazes,
7B, 2, S3.
Okay.
And then he leaves more notes. 9C, leave, but should be tried with more colour.
Yeah. But then the other thing he'd write a lot of, which we've unearthed in our going through all their notes, is his philosophies and his thoughts. It wasn't just these glaze recipes. So
a little notebook
that came out yesterday in your talk. About how he was approaching his practice.
Especially that bit, because I don't know if he ever said anything to you three, but he didn't to me. He didn't make any, and I'm just throwing back to the reference of the possibility of post-traumatic stress from the war. He didn't ever say to me anything difficult really about what he encountered in any difficult moments. A few little examples, but he didn't say, that's why he was depressed, or he didn't make the link between the war and whether he's conflicted as an artist. So we're just making that semantic.
I'm not convinced by that. I think that anyone who went through the Second World War would have had some kind of trauma.
I think he, like a lot of people, kind of blanked it out because he didn't talk about it for a long time, for a decade.
No,
he didn't.
No, he only talked about it much later.
And it was only except in the general sense. And then when we started finding those flags and uniforms and things, and we mucked about with them. But even then, he didn't talk about it.
No, but eventually he did. If you asked him, you could sit for a long time and he would tell you the stories. But that was quite a lot later.
But the first time was on the 50th anniversary when he was in Holland.
Nijmegen.
And he wanted me and Luke to go to have the two generations.
That was
the whole point about it.
Okay, that's lovely.
So we went to Nijmegen and stayed there, and we went to find the gun emplacement where he was positioned by the bridge over the river Barn, I think it is. And it was 50 years to the day. It was in September.
What do you mean his gun position? What would he?
Well, it was a position. It was a big bridge which is still there over the River Vaal, and he was on one side of it, and all that's left now is just a depression in the hollow in the ground. But there would have been a great big gun there.
So he did talk about
to defend the bridge.
So he was,
and he was positioned with this gun.
Because he was in charge. What was it? A number 5 or something? There was some word for it. Anyway,
He was an officer, but
what his position was at some point in terms of that might have been early on actually.
And I think at some point during that period is when he nearly got killed, when his Batman was killed next to him.
He was.
Yes, it was. And I'm wondering what stage that was, because
I think that was during that at the end of the
it
war.
Was.
Because it was 44 May 44,
and he was literally talking to his his runner or whatever they call them, the one that did a lot of
Batman.
Yeah, literally, as we're talking,
It was right.
It was shrapnel took him out, and he.
That's right, and they were exhausted because they'd been in the tank for several days. They'd been travelling in the tank for several days, and then they were hiding in a barn, and they were under fire.
That's right, they were in a barn.
Then there was
But when we went there in Nijmegen, there's a long dike, and you can see it from the town. And that's where they drove along in the tanks. Following the German army was retreating, and they drove along it in tanks. And then we went down there and drove along in the car. It's really quite spooky, really. Yeah. And then we went over the border into Germany, and there's nothing
over the Rhine.
No, I don't think no. Just the border's not very far from Nijmegen. And then we went into German town. Can't remember the name of it. It was only a few kilometres away, and he felt quite uneasy.
Did he? How did he manifest himself? Just went quiet.
I think he went a bit quiet, didn't say very much, and then I think we went to a cafe, and the contrast between Nijmegen and Germany, it was much more uptight, and everybody. And I remember the people cycling their bikes in those bike lanes, which we of course didn't know about, ringing their bells, and and the Dutch didn't really care, So the contrast was amazing. He definitely was uncomfortable. Yeah.
But of course, he did talk to us about all of his stories in Africa after the war.
Maybe that was a happier time, and that's why he was able to talk about that more initially.
But I remember going with, and did the same trip with an artist, Georgia. Deliberately to go to places where Dad had written in his own war memoirs. Where he'd nearly been killed. There are several places he describes. And I remember I did the journey, and I read out those passages in his memoir at the point where he was nearly killed. To video, I've still got the video.
You got the diary though?
Well, they're memoirs we've got.
Memoirs
and also, you can track his division or his platoon. There's historic references to.
Can you?
I think we should all go back there, actually.
I'd do that as our trip.
Well, Paula's working there, so we could.
No,
okay. But in terms of how Dad has affected us creatively, I'm quite interested in, that whole thing of him being traumatised. In my novel that I'm writing, in this novel that I'm writing, which I talked to you about a little bit, it's about a daughter, a woman who's the daughter of a famous ceramicist. Anyway, it's about the woman feeling that her creativity is stifled because she's overwhelmed, or what's the word? Feels overshadowed by the father, and how she overcomes that issue. But in my story, it's not supposed to be autobiographical, but I wanted to have some sort of climax in the story about the father, because the father in my story is quite a grumpy, sort of reserved character. And I wanted there to be some sort of climax where she comes to an understanding of why her father is like that. And I wondered whether it could be something to do with the war, that she suddenly discovers that he's had this trauma in the war. And I'm just wondering how much that did affect him as a person.
That's why I'm saying.
Well, it must have done, I suppose.
Must have done.
I think his nature was before the war. I think he was probably quite a reserved character anyway. But the war experience would have enhanced it, perhaps. So and he must have held stuff back, and
because of course he was effectively, even though he had a wonderful brother, Uncle Ron, he was effectively brought up as a single child by his parents. And he used to say when he went down to Dorset and Devon doing these massive walks with his parents that they would be above the hedgerow and he would be below the hedgerow, and he just felt quite sad because he'd always be walking behind them. And they could see landscapes and stuff.
Mind you, that might be where he got his interest in ecology.
Well, that's exactly because he was then. They bought him a butterfly net.
Butterflies,
and he'd go dragging the butterfly net through the hedgerow because he couldn't see over.
Yeah.
And that's what get him fascinated by butterflies and
That's
birds.
right, but I don't think that I think you're right. It wasn't just the war. I think his personality was affected by his upbringing, and I think he did say once or twice he didn't have a particularly happy adolescence because of his father. Partly his father was kind of quite down on him about, you know, telling him he was thick because he wasn't good at maths and that sort of thing. So he had this bit of an inferiority complex. And I think that affected his, I always thought that affected his personality, really.
But what I still never quite understood is, you know, being in the war, he went to Kenya and India, and then he suddenly decides to go to art college. No, and before the war, there was going to be an insurance company.
No, there is a reference in his memoirs about two friends that he made in the war, and that when they were on leave, they went to the Tate Britain,
really? Right.
And that began an interest in painters.
Yeah, right. That was the genesis, almost.
I think it was something they did. They did something. They made use of the culture that was on offer in the short leave period they had. And that was one of the stories he described.
Because he was good at drawing, wasn't he? He did quite a lot of drawing.
Very good.
And I think Ron, his brother, said to him, you know,
yes, he was very good.
You're good. You know, you should do something about it.
That's what he told me was the reason why he went to art college. Because Ron said you should do something with that, and he decided to. Well, whether it was just
which is also surprising because Ron was very conservative and very straight.
But that might be because Ron didn't want Dad to follow him into the boring bank world.
No, but I think
I always thought so. I thought it was an act of generosity.
He was I think, but don't forget, he was also creative, Ron. He was very gifted with his hands, and he made
carpenter.
He made joinery, cupboards, cabinets.
Yeah, it was all very contained with him, wasn't it?
And it was beautifully done.
And Dad always thought he was this wonderful artist, really, didn't he? About his brother.
He always said he was very good with his hands.
Yeah, and I think he was creative. That's what got him going in it.
But the other thing, I mean, going back to Joe's point, it's great to hear that story actually about your novel that you sort of in the middle of, and that's what the way Dad may have influenced. You know, there has been an influence on you in a way from Dad because he wanted to.
I think so.
Get into creative writing.
Yeah, in terms of doing something creative. I think all my life I wanted to do something creative.
And I think that's come partly from Dad and Mum.
I don't know whether you feel this, but I always felt there's something missing in my life. And
well, because you weren't doing that necessarily.
I never really knew, but I thought maybe it's I wanted to be a journalist. I thought of different things, but I always felt there was something missing in my life.
Did Dad or Mum ever encourage you to do anything creative?
That's why I think I wrote that theme. My novel's got that theme because I didn't feel that in any way, and perhaps I'm misremembering, but I don't think in any way they encouraged me to do something creative. And that's why I'm so motivated to write about it. So on the one hand, I feel yes, I was influenced by Dad just because of his example. And because of our upbringing, maybe. But at the same time, I don't think either of them really encouraged me.
No, but I think that was the same. I remember that they pushed us towards trying to do academic subjects because there was a status thing and still that thing about you've got to try and do something.
Even though they were heavily in the arts.
And I think that was the thinking at the time. Still is largely around. And because we were kind of encouraged to go into geography and biology and do that. And the only reason I ended up in art school is because I really didn't get it and didn't do well at those A levels. And then even Mum had that view. Well, actually, that's not going to work, so I'm going to help him get into art school.
As a last resort.
As a last resort, and thinking that was the best thing because that
was just a hopeless case, really.
No, he ended up in a good.
She had to negotiate his degree.
Yes, that's right. She did because I put down.
She did not.
I think I applied for art and sociology joint degree at Roehampton Institute, and my mum couldn't bear the idea of that. Whilst I was touring around Europe or hitchhiking around Europe, she went into clearing for me and found.
Geography and art.
Geography and art with a built-in environment.
That's right.
Because it had the word geography in it. She felt that was more.
But so I think that point, it goes to the point that actually, and Dad was sort of just in the background, letting Mum do a lot of this. They didn't. Yeah. I mean, they let us draw in their house and all of that. I think we were all,
but not as a career. I mean, I can remember really strongly then. Well, they both wanted me to do architecture and go to Cambridge.
Yes, of course.
So I did all of the entrance exams.
You got into an interview, didn't you?
I got an interview, but I didn't get in.
Yeah.
But thinking back on it, Mum was much more insistent that should be the path. But Dad was more willing to and did sort of encourage me to get involved in pottery.
And taught you
and taught me from quite an early age. So he was a bit more divided, really.
Yes, I think he was.
I remember failing two of my A levels, as with Sam. I always drag you with me.
Yeah.
And then Dad came into the bedroom. I was sleeping in your bedroom. I think you'd already been in university. And he said, what are you going to do now? What's your plan? And I felt a bit worried because you'd never really taken that in. Mum had done it all. And I think Mum had asked him to come up and say that you've got to sort this lad out. But interesting. And he wasn't horrible. He just said, what's your plan? And I said,
what did you say?
I can't remember now what I'd said. I'd said, well, I'd better try and look into how you get into art college. And then Mum,
17.
I must have been
17,
nearly 17, 16 when you finished your A levels. But
then,
funnily enough,
O levels too.
No, A levels
is 18 when you finish your A levels. So you must have been 18.
Yeah. Must have been. Yeah.
Because that's right. I must have been 18.
1970.
But then I managed to get. But Mum then helped me.
She helped me take something.
No, I didn't because I then got into foundation.
But
it's the same as A levels.
Was Dad pleased that you were going to go to art college? Do you think?
Then I didn't because I didn't say. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know then.
Oh, you didn't.
It was Mum that influenced us all. I think much more.
Here's a thing about Mum and Dad. Here's the thing about Mum and Dad. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
But it comes back to what you were saying about my dad's dad.
Yeah.
He was quite harsh on my dad. He was saying, not very sort of encouraging.
Yeah.
Whenever I did anything creative or drew a picture or did well at school, I didn't get any praise from my dad.
Yeah.
That I can remember.
Me neither.
Whereas in my memory banks, I got Mum pouring praise.
Yes, that's
and and I always got. That's where I think I got my confidence from.
Yeah.
Because
I don't think Dad praised us.
I'm not criticism because Dad did other things for me. He inculcated understanding of nature in a big way, and massive amount of interest in tennis. For example, and that's where I got my
sport. But I do think that thing of him not praising, I think that does have an impact.
Yes.
Yeah.
He may not
with me, because I was thinking about it earlier about learning pottery, and he was a very generous but quiet educator.
Yeah.
He was not like Mum, who's much more open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but I can't remember any point when he badly criticised me.
Yes.
But nor did he say that's
brilliant.
But along the way, each step of the way, he encouraged me in a very sort of kind of gentle way.
I think that happens.
Told me how to do things if it was going wrong, which of course it didn't.
And interestingly, when we've met people here, other people said your father was very generous with me, very helpful.
Yeah, he was.
And he came. He allowed me. There was a lady who said he allowed me to come along to his classes every Tuesday night and just hang around. He was very helpful and encouraging.
I think with
that side of him astonished me because I
agree.
didn't know really that side of him.
I don't know what I'm not being judgmental about Dad when I say that. It's just almost
an observation.
But I think we have to.
And I don't know whether that impacted on me or not. But Ben's right. He gave you this incredible amount of knowledge about nature and about other things that I think Mum
both taught me something about, and Mum as much as Dad, and it's to do with looking. Yeah, and they both knew about it. Because I think in the art education system of the 40s and 50s, there was still, as there is in places like China and Holland now, the discipline of looking and then drawing from observations made you understand and gain knowledge of something.
Well, I don't think I understood it at the time.
No,
only when I became an adult.
I didn't fully understand what they were on about, but they said that's why drawing is good.
Yeah.
And I never really took it up notice. Now I completely understand.
But you three also did art
O-level
and
and
that
A-level.
helped him because Dad used to say to me, "I'm totally unobservant."
That's bad.
He always used
so
to say.
So it's a criticism almost.
I'm getting a bit emotional.
No, you're right, but that
he quite often said, "Oh, he remarked about me being unobservant," and he was right.
Yeah.
So I never picked any of that up.
No.
And all the stuff about nature.
You never picked that up.
You know the names of birds. I don't know the names of birds.
Well,
I mean, it was a lovely thing, legacy that he left us, because I think now we've all been. Now it's a big part of my novel, writing about nature.
So it did come into your life eventually.
But it took years before.
But don't you think that's lovely? The fact that he got stimulated into nature by basically having to drag a butterfly net through the hedgerow, and he may have had it before that, but in fact he probably did. 'Cause he talks about frogs in his pond, and then that completely drove a lot of how he created his own artwork. So everything in his artwork is influenced by some natural sort of objects, and whether it's a geological piece of stone from from the Jurassic coast, or whether it's a chicken pot that he's created because it's related to something like that. And I love that.
A guy, when he was growing up, he must have been about 10 or something, a neighbour gave him a magpie that had an injured wing or something.
Was it a magpie or a jackdaw? Oh well,
it was a magpie, and he kept it in a box for quite a long time.
I know.
Yeah, I think got it out and looked after it. But he was kind of really devoted to it.
That is interesting.
Magpies and frogs and all.
Frogs, he kept frogs in his pocket.
Yeah.
Well, no, and he
tried to tie up a frog once, and it's jumped away, and its leg came off,
off,
and then it grew another leg.
And then, do you remember he found a grass snake? There's a lovely story at the bottom of a pond, and which he grabbed, and took it home and put it in his pond, or put it in a tank or something.
Yeah.
And he says that the reptile was so frightened that it regurgitated 2 or 3
great
alive
crested
ewes. So it's obviously resting after it's died, at the bottom of the pond. And these things completely amazed him. I think that influences.
Certainly me as well. I'm
you
obsessed with the great crested. He identified my first catch of a great crested newt, because I caught it in a bucket. I just saw a huge leaf, what I thought was a leaf, and it turned out with the tail of a monster. To me, it was a monster. And I took it back to show Dan. He said, "Well, that's a great crested." I didn't know what they were before. I knew about the smaller, smooth.
Yeah, they were a bit boring, weren't they?
The common newt. Common newt.
No, I remember going down to the village pond in Mortimer.
It's interesting, Joe, you didn't get the nature thing, but maybe that's...
No, I didn't.
Maybe
it was critical of me when I was younger. What were you going to say? Maybe it's because of...
I don't know. Maybe he had a gender thing. He sort of...
I wonder why we got it and you didn't. Maybe there was a sort of...
Maybe he felt it was,
not appropriate for a young lady.
Or a young
or it was a cultural thing, maybe a social thing, who knows.
But I mean, I do remember him saying to me about this very odd concept, which I've never understood to this day, that he also got somewhere very deep and primevally inside of him, like almost, he was implying that some sort of creative urge from Neanderthal times was in him.
Oh, really?
And that he didn't think that was good for his creative expression, because it interrupted some of his thoughts or how he wanted to go forward. So he was very interested in primitive art and Neanderthal paintings and all of that sort of side.
So he dragged it back?
Well, I don't know. I didn't have enough time to talk to him
because you're Neanderthal. Maybe you couldn't process
I'm proud of the Australopithecus problem here. But
the ridge.
What do you think that was?
What to say that again? Sorry,
he said to me his conscious and subconscious creative thoughts. He thought they came straight directly to him from prehistoric man.
Okay,
and that it's passed down through the generation right away to modern man. And that he felt he was urged through it, not in some weirdo way, but that
why did he say that was detrimental then?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I didn't have enough chance because he got very old.
That reminds me also, Sam. I think it's something I saw when he wrote recently, that he said, I can't talk to other people about how close I feel to animals because they think it's odd.
Really? Yeah, that's lovely though. I do like that remark.
It's something he'd written.
It's beautiful.
He was even unusually close to animals in the natural world.
Yeah. Which is just unbelievable yesterday for me to see are they blue tits or great tits nesting in his medallion pot.
Yeah, that's kind of.
And I thought, oh my God, if I was a spiritualist, I think he's come back and he's a blue tit in his pot. But it's so poignant now.
Yeah. But he did have some quite strange philosophical ideas, didn't he?
Yeah.
And there was one I remember. It's a philosopher, I can't remember his name now, French, I think, who wrote about this idea that there wasn't God exactly, but there was some sort of something in the ether, that was outside of people's consciousness, and it was all to do with consciousness. I'm sure he believed it to the day he died. That consciousness was something; it wasn't a material thing. It was this. It was because of something bigger. And he didn't describe it as God, but it was something else.
Oh, Ben, he was evangelical about that philosophy.
He was,
didn't he? We had big
quite big ideas. He hated some of the reductionists, as they called themselves, and people who think it's all down just to biology. And he was actually, I think, quite spiritual, wasn't he?
He went to that philosopher, didn't he, to have his
with Alan
Smith,
the study society or whatever they called it.
There was a group in London, wasn't there?
Yeah, we used to
in the Cromwell Road.
Yeah, got on the name of it.
Because he also talked about not knowing being a good thing. That there's no way that man can know everything. We shouldn't worry about trying to strive to understand physics and complete and trying to prove the non-existence of God. He got very upset about that. He was suspicious of the reductionists,
That's true, but on the other hand, he loved reading about science.
He did. He still loved it.
The universe, and I think he had.
Yeah, of course. A lot of scientists are quite religious people.
Arrow and that. Yeah, I mean, he did read a lot of those.
He hated Richard Dawkins.
Well,
not him as a person, but his Richard Dawkins philosophy.
He was very interested in it.
He was.
Because it was so close to his philosophical. Not close in ideas, but it was his territory. It's his philosophical territory. That's why it wound him up so much.
But it attacked his
whole being.
I do remember those debates, stroke arguments I had with him, and probably you lot did, about, he would try and say ideas were external, that came somehow from another place into your mind.
Right, he did,
And he said that to me.
Where ideas come from, it's not always internal.
And he didn't like anything, that sort of
suggested,
that it could be in you and your neurological sort of synapses that can create thoughts from within.
You didn't really believe that,
but based on your experience.
Based on your experience,
in the outside world.
Probably because it's too close to a sort of Marxist interpretation. Didn't like that at all, did he? But it was fascinating.
No, we used to have some terrible rows about politics.
Awful atmospheres. Do you remember? And Mum hated trying to kind of placate it.
I remember the worst row ever I had with my dad was I think it was one of the French socialist presidents who got elected into France. I think you were living in France. Who would that have been? Would that have been
Mitterrand, probably.
It was in the papers or something. And I said to him, I see France as, got a socialist president. That's really good. Of course that was over.
You didn't like the term.
No,
he hated that.
And he said,
he thought it was anti-individual.
You're right.
Anyway, I said to him, well, what's wrong with you, Dad? Are you scared of a socialist French sort of president? He went back. Don't you call me a yellow blood? Don't you call me a yellow belly? Like that.
He had an outburst.
Because I just was scared.
Yellow belly.
Yellow belly.
Oh, that would definitely go back to the war.
That was a right... And I didn't realise at the time we had a massive row. But I stood my ground. And I wasn't, and sort of tried to argue out and he calmed down a bit. And Mum was sort of cowering in the kitchen. That hatchway between the diner and the kitchen. And then she said to me afterwards, she said, you did really well there to hold your ground. And she didn't intervene.
Mum was more sympathetic to socialist ideas than Dad.
She was.
Probably
Anyway.
a working class background.
Yeah, that's right. I don't think he ever really understood it. Probably Dad.
I don't think his politics influenced us that much. We reacted against it because of the politics of the time, I suppose. We were caught up in the movement in the 70s.
But, you know, I was just thinking about going back to the way he's influenced us. And there was a couple of things I'm thinking of. One good way, despite I was said he, you know, told me I was unobservant and all those things, but he did say what he was very good was saying to follow. He was very much into, when we were older, follow your instincts and do the right thing for you. I think. I think he didn't like the idea of you being in a job which was boring and soul destroying, because I think he had followed his heart by going into art. So I think that was one way in which he did sort of encourage me, anyway. In fact, he did encourage, even though I didn't listen to him, he did always encourage me, because I used to talk to him a lot if I was unhappy, and he was very good to talk to at a certain period during my life, for quite a long time, till he probably got too old and couldn't do it anymore. But he did he was always sympathetic and say, well, you're unhappy because you're not doing what you should be doing, you know. And I think that was...
He recognised that.
Yeah, so that was a nice way in which he influenced me, I think. But I think it is surprising how much your parents do influence you.